Yeah. Could there be a better intro? We're going through Bruce Springsteen, Born to Run. Hey, this is KARAC HENDRIKS. This road is mine. It is Father's Day when we're recording this, so it's a very fitting day that not only do I have my son Cohen, but I also have my dad Brent Bexon across the, I would say across the pond, but no, there's no ponds. It's just across the province. Let's say the province, yeah.
Yep.
Awesome. We've got you there. Very fitting. Springsteen is a big deal.
I'd say he's your guy's father.
He's definitely ours.
Grandpa Bruce.
Yeah, we can go with that one.
Pretty
Yeah.
much.
Yeah, Bruce is like when Brett and I first met, we bonded over our loves of hot food, hatred of mushrooms, and a clear adoration for the boss.
Yeah.
So, yeah, among many other things, but so we're
Gotta start somewhere.
well, exactly, and what a better better place to start. So we're going to talk about Born to Run. I think the reason I wanted to use Born to Run is because, well, Clarence died, what was the date?
June 18th, so 10 years ago.
Okay, 2011 or 2010?
2011.
Okay, wow, so it is 10 years, okay.
10 years, yeah.
And he features prominently on the full gatefold cover of Born to Run.
I love this cover.
Yeah. Yeah, do you want to fill your grandson in on the significance of the Clarence photo?
Well, it's the, I mean, you have to go back to the beginning. Like, one of the things that's been coming up, of course, with the Black Lives Matter movement is talking about Bruce being having almost an all black band or mostly black band for when it was when it was certainly not well known to be mixed race bands. I mean,
Yeah.
it was out there, but for him to be from the top from 72 in that time period, just after the Vietnam War. Asbury Park was a hotbed of racial tension, and he could have cared less.
Yeah. What was there was a big event there, wasn't there, in Asbury Park, like an actual, like, well-known historical
Yeah, there was a riot. There was
yeah.
a riot in '67. They burned down a bunch of the boardwalk and stuff. When I was there when was I there? 70? No. 94. I was in Asbury Park, and I got in a cab, and just to make conversation with the cab driver, I said, because I noticed the town was a bit run down, right? Lots of boarded up buildings and stuff. So I said to the cab driver, how long has it been going downhill here? And he said, well, I moved here in 1971 and it's been going downhill ever since. I was like, oh, okay. And then, of course, when you read the history, yeah, it was like that. But in terms of the cover, I mean, it was, again, just the brilliance of that folded gate with and the comradeship of the two of them.
Yeah.
The big black man with the white guy, right? The skinny white rock guitar player, right?
Yeah.
So
Bruce looks really happy.
Yeah. Well, he was. Yeah. Yeah, Clarence was kind of his foil in a way, like not necessarily romantically. Although on stage they did kiss a lot, actually. Like,
They did
yeah,
kiss a lot,
oh
yeah.
yeah, there was a whole, like, because they were just such straight dudes, like they didn't care. They were, like Bruce would go right up to him, just like kiss him on the lips, like they were. Yeah, it was awesome. But
Nice.
I always, it seemed to me, and Bruce has probably talked about this, but where like he actually like really was energized from, like, I mean, Clarence was he was the big man, like he was tall and he
6'6".
yeah, and
Really?
and he is still like, and I'm no aficionado when it comes to saxophone, but he's the best. Like, I'm sorry, like the parts, even though he didn't necessarily come up with all the parts, I think some of them were maybe bossed around to him by the boss or by little Steven.
How tall is Bruce then? Because
This
it
is
looks.
5'8.5", 5'9".
Yeah,
How much does he weigh?
Well, I don't know.
After breakfast.
we
let's say.
hacked into his records when we hacked into his medical records.
When his diet was nothing but cheeseburgers and French fries, it was probably
Yeah.
130. Now he's probably 180, but it's probably solid muscle now, right?
son of a
Yeah.
bitch. He's gonna outlive all of us. It's kind of crazy.
5'8.5". That's pretty short.
Yeah,
Yeah.
considering, right?
Well,
like,
just because on the cover, Clarence doesn't look that much taller than. Did they
Well,
give
he's
him
bent
some?
over, yeah.
yeah, Clarence has
he's
kind
a
of got
bit
his
bent,
hip down,
yeah.
and Bruce is probably
But
standing
if
on a
you look
box.
at
I was
the,
gonna say, yeah.
if you look at the picture of me and Bruce together, I'm 5'8.5". We're pretty much
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
side by side.
that's
right?
true,
So,
yeah.
Cool.
yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, Bruce really got like super fit. Like he was just
Yeah,
kind
it's
of
cool.
what they'd call dick and ribs back then, I think. But I think like in the 80s, like when he started doing the Amnesty International tour, he started getting really ripped. So like I think him and Sting and Tracy
yeah,
Chapman
Sting
were
too,
doing lifting barbells and dumbbells.
That's cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
He does have very nice biceps.
Well, he's super fit, yeah, and he's
well
talked about that,
defined now.
yeah. And in the book, like when you finally do get to read his autobiography, like he talks about like, his fitness thing is really keeps his mental health in check and stuff too. It's really cool, yeah. He's the man. So your introduction to Bruce was Darkness, though, right? Is that?
Yeah, well, I made some notes because I kind of wanted to make sure to get this right. So I was talking in before we got online about how June seems to be such an important month for me and my relationship with Bruce. So June 4th, 1978 was the day I was introduced to this record.
Wow.
And Springsteen. Cool. I mean, I'd been reading about him, like I was a big Cream and those magazines, those rock magazines. So I'd read about guys like Bruce, and the myth was kind of there, but I'd never heard a note of the music. So I was playing in a band called Saturday Night Special, and we did a gig on the Saturday night. So that had been June 3rd, and the sax player in Saturday Night Special, Kirby Hayes, and one of the guitar players named Art Vandenberg lived about 6 houses away from my parents' house.
Nice.
And so I got up on the Sunday morning after the gig. For some reason, I couldn't sleep in that well. And I got up and I walked down to their place about maybe 10, 11 o'clock in the morning and knocked on the door. And Art answered the door in his bathrobe. And you could tell I'd woken him up. And he's like, "Oh, come on in." So he says, "Oh, I'm going to take a shower. Read this." And he handed me Born to Run.
Okay.
And I read the lyrics from start to finish without hearing the music.
That's
and
cool.
I was just blown away. Still, some of my favorite Springsteen lyrics of all time are on this record. And then he got out of the shower and he put the music on. And like, holy crap. Like, I was just blown away. I mean, there is no better, as far as I'm concerned, there is no better first song on any record than Thunder Road.
Yeah.
Thunder Road I just listened to this for the first time like a month ago.
Yeah.
Thunder Road and Jungle Land, which is the last one, were probably my favorites.
Yeah. And that closes the record. So,
yeah,
just a great bookend. But I read those lyrics first, that's, like I said, open up the gatefold and there it is, The screen door slams, Mary's dress waves. Yeah. And it is waves, not sway.
Yeah, not sways. Yeah.
Cohen, you wouldn't know about this, but there is a bit of controversy for some strange reason that people want to fight over it, whether the word is waves or sways.
Really?
It's written in the thing. It's written as waves.
That sounds like some Star Wars controversy.
Yeah, exactly. Roy Orbison singing For the Lonely, right? I mean, it just and the harmonica. Oh man, like it just. Yeah. But that was so that was June 4th, and the next and Darkness on the Edge of Town came out June 2nd. So on the Friday before that. Yeah. So when I went to the record store I think I couldn't go Monday, but I think I went to the record store Tuesday or Wednesday, and bought all the Springsteen for the first 2, and then Born to Run, and then of course Darkness on the Edge of Town was brand new. Yeah. Like it had literally come out 4 days earlier. Yeah. So that was my introduction to it. So, and then the other connection to June is I met Bruce on June 10th.
Right. What year was that?
All within the same time, almost the same week.
Yeah, that's crazy, isn't it? What year did you meet him again?
That's I think 2010.
Okay.
So it's 11 years.
Wow.
That's cool that it came around like that. Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Same month. And then Clarence dies a year later. I mean,
that's crazy.
Yeah.
It was meant to be. Well, unfortunately.
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah, no, that's and it's it does seem like even like June, just like the music, it feels like getting ready for summer kind of thing.
I kind of agree with that.
Although Darkness could be a fall record in some ways, it's so heavy and dark, but still rocking. And did you ever listen to any of the bootleg live stuff at any point through this? Like, I know you didn't buy a lot of them or any of them, if I recall, but did anyone have them over the years that you had checked out?
You mean, what do you mean?
Like the 78 live shows, at least in the US, were such a huge thing.
No, I never. That's one area where you and I differ a little bit. We're both completists and we both have OCD, but we both treat them differently. I was with my Bruce obsession I was never going to get anything outside of what was released.
Yeah.
to the world, so to speak. So I was never one of those guys looking for the bootlegs. I was never looking for the 7-inch Japanese singles.
Yeah, that would be cool.
I could have cared less about that. Partly I think with Bruce too is he at one time, I don't know if this still holds up today, but at one time he was the most bootlegged artist on the planet.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Right, so you could go into a place like Recordland in Calgary and find anywhere from 4 to 15 bootleg albums of Springsteen, right?
Yeah.
And of course, with bootlegs, quality can be, up and down like crazy. So I would have never, I could have bought something and then gone, oh, that's terrible. It absolutely sucks. And, you buy a bootleg because there's one song on it that you've never heard or something, right? And I've never gone down that rabbit hole probably as deeply as you have.
Well, so. And actually, it's funny though. I didn't really either on the studio stuff, but once he started officially releasing the live stuff, I thought, okay, if you're putting some energy into it, and I think the radio station on Sirius XM helped with that too. He was one of the first, if not the first, artist to have his own station on Sirius XM. E Street Radio on Channel 20. But the live stuff, of course, was kind of legendary. There were the '78 tour, the Darkness tour. Cohen had all the tours are amazing, but there were 5 shows that were aired on FM radio throughout the country, and then of course they would either be recorded off of the radio, or some people actually got copies of them from, I guess, the actual tapes or vinyls, or I don't know how they were transmitting them then. And then you could kind of buy them illegally or whatever. And because his live performances are always amazing, and that era in particular, I think people were just cresting. So, because he was also, the stuff was coming out, so 4 albums in, and then he also had songs that were being cut by other artists around this time too. Songs he was writing and recording so many, demoing that he just couldn't release them all. So, his
the
genius.
Classic, I think, from this time period, well, a little later, was Because the Night with Patti Smith, right?
Exactly.
That was from the Darkness sessions.
Yeah, that's right. And then Fire by the Pointer Sisters was around there, I think, too. Possibly.
Number 1 song in the world in 1978.
Yeah, crazy. Yeah. And then, of course, his version came out officially later, like a live version. In the 80s or whatever. So his whole, there's a box set we may get to on this show. It's but with it was live 75 to 85, and when that came out in 86, of course I was still a kid, but I even knew that it was an event. It was a 5 LP set, or actually I think it was still on 8-track too. If and then 3 cassettes or 3 CDs or something, and I mean that took you right from 75 to 85, live shows, and so a lot of the stuff I've been downloading through the official website is live shows from those. Like the whole concert, even though there was only 2 songs on that collection or whatever. So it's really hard to separate Bruce studio from Bruce live in some ways. But studio, especially this album, there's a documentary called Wings for Wheels when it came out, and the box set, and he talks about how he slaved over this record, and he just could not let it go. They had to tear it from his cold dead hands.
Let's take it back to so when you think about so the first and second records came out 72 and 73, and Columbia Records was just about giving up on him. They basically said, Born to Run is your last shot, right? If this record doesn't work, we're dropping you. And there was initially a lot of resistance to even put money behind it for promotions. So this is the most interesting thing. So Born to Run, the song Born to Run was recorded first, and he took 6 months to make that one song perfect. And that's where the obsession of the let's make a Spectre record, right? The Wall of Sound. Apparently there was 12 acoustic guitar tracks on Born to Run.
Oh wow! Like the song,
right? I mean, lots of people have done that since and do it today. But for 1974, for an artist who really hadn't sold a lot of records at this point, for him to actually say, "Yeah, I'm going to spend all this time and money on this," and they were working in a less than great studio as well at the time. And this is also when John Landau came in to play. So John Landau, to give context, was basically a critic, a rock and roll critic. And he had written the famous line, I've seen the future of rock and roll, and his name is Bruce Springsteen, right? And that became the catchphrase that the record company threw on everything.
Yeah, and Bruce hated that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and he hated it. Yeah, for
but
sure.
then he wouldn't want it any other way. I think he said as well.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But then, so he brought when he brought John Landau, and Landau was sort of the guy who first walked in the studio during Born to Run sessions and said, you guys, what your ambition is here, what you're trying to do is wonderful, but you're probably not going to capture it in this studio. So he moved them to the record plant, which is obviously a famous recording studio in New York City now, but back then was still a big studio. But and that kind of changed everything. That's when all of a sudden it started to come together. So they had the song finished, and basically the record company said, you give us a single first. Before you finish the record. So he spent 6 months working on one song, handed it into the record company. And of course they were blown away. And that's when things turned, when the record company said, all right, we're going to up the budget for promotions and everything else. But Bruce also released it to, Orlando released it to some of the radio stations in the area, or I shouldn't say in the area, basically people that were big supporters of Bruce's, even through the first and second record, that were playing his stuff on the radio. There's the famous guy is Kid Leo in Cleveland, and he would play Born to Run. So Bruce he gets an advance copy of the single, literally almost a year before the album came out, and refused to stop playing it. The record company gave it to him and said, here, listen to this and let us know what you think. And instead he puts it on the air and keeps playing it every Friday afternoon at 5:00 to kick off the weekend.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So it had this snowball effect of, and obviously a great track, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, that was what started. And then they went back and finished the rest of the record, right? But crazy.
So what year did you become a Springsteen fan?
78.
Okay, so when
3
you
years
were...
after.
Yeah. Okay, so but you still would have been able to follow along with him as
well. That's what I said.
Cool.
I was reading Cream magazine and Crawdaddy, so there were stories about this guy and the legend, and of course the comparisons to the Bob Dylan curse, right? The new Dylan.
He was a new Dylan.
Right.
Yeah, and so I knew who he was, but just hadn't heard the music, and then like I said, I literally got to hear the music on a Sunday morning and went he'd released Darkness on the Edge of Town the previous week. So
that would have been cool to be a fan as more stuff was coming out too.
Yeah. Well, and being a fan and watching his rise, I mean, like for me, of course, this is where the generational situation happens, right? Like, so my impact was clearly Born in the USA. Like, I'll never forget, like, I mean, the Glory Days video, the I'm on Fire video, like those were movies, and I was like glued every time. And the songs were almost like of course they're the great songs, but like they were almost secondary for me. Like Bruce was more of a visual thing for me. The archetypal, like, the baseball guy and the cap in the back of the jeans and like he kind of created that whole Americana. Well, he probably wasn't the only one, but he, for me, really like epitomized like that. Like you can be rural, but you're not a hick and you're not a cowboy. Like they're and that working man sort of thing.
He gives me a like good, you could say like a vibe, I suppose, that he's like as you should be, like proud to be American, but not that doesn't mean you're proud of
everything.
What's happening.
Yeah. Well, the highs and the lows. He's the best example of someone that clearly Born in the USA was a misunderstood song. It was about Vietnam and about how they don't treat our vets well. And he's always been even later. There was a song called 41 Shots that he did. It was about when the cops, they threw literally 41 shots into this innocent black dude. Like, and that was back in like 2000, 2001. He was doing the song live, and the cops would like walk out of the shows live. It was he's always kind of stood for what he believes in, and come hell or high water. And I think that's why, like, even for myself, just as a human being, I think, like, I've always found it's okay to relate to my family and my friends from back home, but not necessarily agree with all their stuff, because like it's not that simple.
Yeah. And
Lloydminster would have had, I mean, a similar situation too. I mean, that, it's an oil patch town. Bruce often sings from that, that like in his case, it was the steel mills and the whatever else was kind of going on out on the East Coast there in the U.S. And he famously says too, like, you know, he was singing about and for the working man, but he had really never worked a day in his life.
Yeah.
But he had enough humility, you know, and
Yeah.
balls to admit it. And
Yeah.
and his dad was one of those, I think,
Yeah.
right, in a way. So
for sure.
yeah, what a storyteller. Yeah.
So Asbury Park, is that actually like where he's from, or?
Freehold,
Well,
technically, right?
he's born and raised in Freehold, which is about 20 miles away,
Yeah.
So where is Asbury Park?
right on the coast,
Yeah.
Okay.
about an hour and a half south of New York City.
Okay.
So when I went to New York City in 1994 with the company I was with, I got on a bus on the Saturday morning and went to Asbury Park.
Yeah.
As
But
one does.
Yeah, of course.
everybody else went to see the Statue of Liberty, and I went to
Yeah,
Of
New
course.
Jersey.
yeah.
But yeah, it was it's about a 90-minute bus ride. I took it right out of Central Station in downtown New York City and got on the bus and went out there. And but it's almost more like sort of his spiritual home. Danny DeVito was actually born and raised in
Oh,
Asbury,
right.
That's
yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
oddly enough. But yeah, it's just where that's where the Stone Pony Bar is, which he played repeatedly over the years, and still does once in a
Yeah.
while, right, kind of thing. So it became kind of, and all up and down the shore, apparently in that, I don't know how much a radius, but every little bar, every little seaside town had a little bar, and they had a band,
Yeah.
right? So they could play all over that little area, but Asbury Park was sort of the place that's claimed him as their spiritual son, kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
so when I was in, again, I know that these podcasts, being one of the handful of people that listens to every podcast you guys do,
The only one.
A handful of like a skill.
well, and I know Karak and I talked about this, how most of your episodes end up being an hour, and I was like,
Yeah.
yeah, we'll be lucky if we finish in 90 minutes. The way
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
But so when I got to Asbury Park off the bus, I went down to the boardwalk immediately, and then I went into a 7-Eleven, and I asked to buy some film. And then I had a book. I have many books on Springsteen, but I had this book that was sort of your kind of guide book if you're going to the region. So it tells you all these little places that he'd been to, and the bars he played, and at the time there was a rock and roll Hall of Fame in Asbury Park, New Jersey, which was of course almost completely dedicated to Bruce stuff.
Oh, yeah.
So I get there and I got the book in my hand, and I go up to the guy at the 7-Eleven and I say, can you tell me where the Rock and Roll Museum is? Because the book even said that it moves around, because it's not nobody's paying a lot of money to have this thing open, so it's not in a permanent home, right? And so the guy looks at me and he goes, must be a Bruce fan. And I go, yeah. And he says, where are you from? And I said, Lloydminster, Saskatchewan, Canada. And he's like, and he starts laughing, and he calls his buddy, the other guy working at the 7-Eleven, hey man, this guy came all the way from Canada to see Asbury Park. And so I asked him where this museum was. He goes, well, it's in Cleveland now. And I'm like, oh, like, yeah, they took all the stuff that was here, the little bit that was here, and moved it to the actual Rock and Roll Museum in Cleveland. So anyway, I wander out of there and I go down. Of course, the first place I go to is the Stone Pony. Now it's Saturday morning, about 11 o'clock, right? And I go to the front doors of the bar and it's locked. There's nobody around. And I'm thinking, it's Saturday. I mean, if it's a bar, it should be open roughly by noon. I mean, if you look at Canada, we're open. Back then it was like 11 a.m. Most bars open, right? So I'm standing there looking at the place, holding onto the door, and this guy comes up and he says, can I help you? And I go, I was kind of hoping to get inside. Is it, what's the deal? Why is it closed? And he says, well, we don't really open anymore unless there's a live band playing. Mm. And I was like, oh crap. And he's like, so I told him I came all the way from Canada, and he's like, oh, well, today's your lucky day because I'm the janitor.
Oh, that's cool.
So he lets me in and lets me walk around and take pictures. And yeah, so the other thing about the Stone Pony in Asbury Park, it's the very first venue that Elvis Costello played in American soil.
Right, yeah.
So it's like a famous bar,
yeah,
right?
Cool.
Yeah. And so I walk around taking pictures, and stood on the stage and my legs started shaking. Like, holy crap, I'm standing where he stood all the time. And so I asked the guy, I said, so how many people fit into this club? And it looked to me like maybe 300 people, right? And he says, yeah, I think we're licensed for 350. And I said, and how many people are here when Bruce plays here? And he says, about 1,000. And so what they do is there's a side door, and they basically get a bunch of big beefy bouncers and they form a flying wedge. And Bruce sits inside the wedge, and they walk right through the crowd and get him on the stage. And when he's finished, they do the same thing to get him off stage, right? So
yeah,
but,
you'd have to.
What year was that?
94.
Okay.
95, pardon me. September 16th, 1995.
Yeah. Close to the birthday. Yeah.
So
yeah, very close, yeah.
And so you went there specifically to see the
Yeah, well, I was
Bruce
hoping to see
tourism?
Bruce, actually, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
but no, I just to tour all the old haunts. And I didn't go out to Freehold because that would have been a cab ride, and I was kind of like, well, I'll just stay in Asbury Park. So, but you can look at stuff that's back then when I was there in '95, the Convention Hall, which is a sort of famous concert hall, like the Who played there. I can't remember all of the Deep Purple, like, it was a major concert hall back in the day, but when I was there in '95, it was literally a ghost building. Like, it was broken windows, and there was nothing in it anymore. It was could have been condemned, but they kept it, and eventually they did put money back into it and rebuild it. So that some of the tour, what was that? Was that the Rising tour? I think, KARAC, where they rehearsed the band in the convention hall, and then did some live footage. And I think he was on whatever not Canada AM, but the American.
Oh, like Good Morning America or something.
Good Morning America,
yeah, I think so. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. There's so many of those venues, and of course, because the U.S. is so much bigger too. There's so many more people that. Yeah, there. Like a guy like Bruce and a lot of other bands, like Jay Giles Band, or whatever. Like, they would have these huge followings, like regionally. But and their regionally is still probably bigger than Canada, right? Like, at least as far as money and people. Yeah. But like Bruce would stop at every, in the tri-state area, up into Boston, and like just all these little bars that were legendary. You'd hear about them because of these great shows that, like, guys like Bruce would do.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that whole Asbury Park scene too. I mean, like, Bruce is always the first guy to give credit to. Like, one guy that I always talk about is Southside Johnny and the Asbury Jukes, right? So they were kind of the archetype for Bruce in a way, right? Like, Bruce early on kind of had this Dylan Van Morrison thing going on, right? Like, it's hard for us that are fans to admit that, but like it is true. Like, to an outsider, that's what they would hear or see. And that ethos, but like also bringing in a lot of just that classic rave up rock and roll, like from the Renaissance, right? The 55, 65 era rock and roll, garage rock, and so he would like in different incarnations of bands that he was in, or he was like a great side guitar player too, and but always wanted to write his own songs and play and sing.
Well, it's just part of the reason why Clarence was in the band, because at that time, everybody had to have a saxophone, because it was all about soul and R&B stuff, right? Cohen, I don't know, KARAC and I have talked about this, but I don't know if you've got to that yet. But one of the things we talked about, from the box set from Born to Run, there's a live from the Hammersmith Odeon Theatre in London.
Okay. And
that performance, when you watch the video, they don't come across like, to me, a rock band. They come across like a soul band, like an R&B band. They're way more funky. Right.
I could see
this
that.
Born to Run was really kind of more the time when they kind of got a little bit more straight ahead rock and roll, although there's still lots of horns on it, right? 10th Avenue Freeze Out, of course. Right. But yeah, if you watch that, I think you'll get a whole different perspective on the depth of where their roots were, right? So
yeah, definitely. Yeah, we're gonna watch that. Maybe we'll watch that this afternoon. Crank it up, because it's a marvelous show. Yeah, it was a time when the album was done. It had come out or was just coming out. And, he goes over to London. and they're ready for him, right? Like that was his first time off of the soil, off of U.S. soil, and and going around. And of course, the record label has done their job and promoted the crap out of it. And the future is here. Bruce Springsteen's here, and so he had a lot to live up to. But he had and it's the perfect. I would say my favorite sports team is the E Street Band. Like,
of course.
Like they're a freaking Max Weimer had finally joined because some of his original members were sort of involved in this album, but like the two of the guys, the other two black guys that were in the band at the time were, of course, David Sanchez on keys and what was the drummer? Crap. Well, yeah.
He's
only on board to run. He's only on board to run, I think, right?
Drums.
Yeah. Boom Boom Carter.
Yeah, Ernest Carter.
Ernest
yeah.
Boom Boom Carter.
Yeah.
So the odd thing is that iconic drum lick at the start of Born to Run is not Max Wembley.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It's
Ernest Boom Boom Carter.
Yeah.
And but they were gone by that time and replaced by So Born to Run came out August 25th, 1975, and the Hammersmith Odeon shows were in October.
Right.
So 3 months later. But yeah, Bruce, like he didn't really like his performance at the Hammersmith Odeon. I think until they actually went back to the archives and played him. They put together the what we see in the box set. He was under so much pressure and his own personal pressure. It wasn't anybody else's. Well, I guess it was. I mean, when all the posters say the future is here, come see Bruce Springsteen. I guess that's some pressure.
Probably.
But he came in and did his show amazing and really did knock it out of the park. But he wasn't so sure of that at the time.
As most good artists are, like they are. You never leave the stage or rarely feeling like, yep, that I killed it. Or if you do, usually you didn't. And Bruce, like you should always feel like there's got to be better. And whereas and then we watch and we're like, oh, that was one of the best things that's ever happened. And he had like the E Street Band was like his brotherhood, right? So kind of his foil is like obviously Clarence in some ways, but Stephen Van Zandt too plays a really big part in this album and in the future too. And he's the first guy to leave too because he's also got this side to him. Like Stephen wants to be an artist himself and clashes with John Landau a little bit too. And so, sometimes there's those egos or there's just there's just not enough room in the band for both of us kind of thing. That makes sense. But when a guy like Bruce is there to like light the world on fire, and he's got like a core group of guys behind him that have his back and are performing. Like it's the most inspiring thing that you can ever see. He's got two keyboard players that are freaking marvelous. He's got he's a great guitar player himself. Stephen Van Zandt's a great guitar player. Bass and drums. Max was a great drummer then. He's an even better drummer now that he's 70. He's and of course Gary Talent on bass, just a marvelous bass player. Always just I'll use the underrated word once. I try not to use that term too much, but Gary is one of them.
Well, and I was listening to I listened to the whole album this morning again, and 10th Avenue Freeze Out. The bass in that song is so good.
Oh, amazing.
So the story there, Cohen, is and part of how Steve Van Zandt became really sort of Bruce's lieutenant, I guess is what they called him, was that they were trying to record 10th Avenue Freeze Out with the horn section, and they just couldn't get it. Right, it was just going on and on and on, and they've got fairly expensive studio guys in there trying to do this stuff, and of course they couldn't. It wasn't working. So Steve Van Zandt he'd been working with some other horn bands, and of course with Southside Joining, which featured horns as well. And so he finally said, he said to Bruce, this stinks. and Bruce says, well, you think you can do it better? And Steve says, yeah, I think I can. And he goes into the studio and he literally taught the horn players, the Brecker brothers, some of the most famous, and David Sanford, right?
That's cool.
Teaches some of the best horn players in New York City, sings their parts to them so they can record this horn part, and of course nails. So, and apparently Bruce turned to John Landau and says, "Put him on the payroll."
Exactly.
So, but I think Stephen was always kind of his like his foil, like you said. he would cast a dissenting vote a lot of times, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, so Bruce would have a certain opinion about something, and John would usually agree with Bruce because he's his manager. But Stephen would be sometimes the guy in the room who would say, "No, it's not perfect yet," or "No, this sucks," or
And Bruce seems like the kind of sorry to interrupt, but like Bruce seems like the kind of guy that would encourage that too. He seems like he would look for other opinions and improvements.
That's why Steven's still in the band, right?
Yeah,
So
he's been in and out a bit, but yeah,
like he seems like, I mean, I have no idea, but he seems like he would kind of be the guy that would almost probably, you know, admire that somebody's standing up to the boss and like giving their opinion.
For sure, yeah, definitely. And he, but the nice thing about watching Bruce in his whole career is that like he's never defaulted, like he's always in control. Like and his manager John Lando's behind him 100%. Even if maybe John's not like super into it, they'll talk it through. But like musically or otherwise, like Bruce, he knows what he wants and it's in his head. And of course, like same with those horn charts with Steven, like, he just hummed. No, it's got to go like this. Cause I mean, you listen to, like if you listen to Sam and Dave, like the stuff that they were listening to when they were kids or coming up, they're like, well, yeah, no, this is how the horns should go. Like they know how it's supposed to go. They may not know exactly how to write it down on the charts for the Brecker brothers to read, but you know, they know how to do this. And there's that scrappy sort of, DIY Rhodes Scholar, like ROAD Scholar, that really, you know, the band really just came through on, and because they knew what worked live too, right? It's all about, you know, keeping the crowd going, having a great pace to a show, and then of course by the time this album comes out, the live shows become monstrous, but then they kind of get cut short because Bruce, you might notice, remember you were talking about the credits on the back and there's like some asterisks and there were some things. There's a guy in there named Mike Appel, and Mike was his original manager. Mike, they had a falling out, let's put it that way. They've, I think, reconciled since. And is Mike dead now, or is he
no, he's still alive.
Okay. But you know, like John basically like took Bruce to the next level, and Mike kind of got left in the dust. But and so they were kind of in a battle, like legally, for a while. So Bruce really only he didn't do any shows really in '76 of note. And then '77 he did a few shows, but and then of course '78 was like, okay, I got Darkness on the Edge of Town, let's go, and they did, and then
well, they played enough shows from sort of Born to Run on to keep. That was the only money that the band had coming in.
Right.
So.
Yeah.
But they didn't play a lot, right? So, Mike Appel and John Lando, I mean, almost they have the same. They both have like supreme faith in Bruce's talent. Mike was more of the, like they talk about him as being sort of like a troop leader, like one of those guys that, you know, takes charge. And I mean, he believed wholly in Bruce, and he. The legend, of course, is when they finally got an audition with John Hammond. Mike Appel says to John Hammond, "So I heard you're the guy who discovered Bob Dylan and Billie Holiday. Let's see if you have ears, or if that was a fluke."
John
Hammond say that.
Yeah, he's like a recording industry
but that was
legend,
the kind of pushy guy that he was. Whereas, and then John Lando came along, who was actually more well-read. And John actually had a history of going back in the music business too, like with the MC5, he produced one of their stuff. So he knew more about records and the process than Mike did too, right?
And a player, like he still sits in and plays guitar with Bruce live whenever they're like, he's not great, but
But from that point on, that's what fractured the relationship with Mike and put them in court, right? So a legendary lawsuit.
And then Bruce ended up, like, long story short, Bruce ended up like kind of going back and owning the rest of what Mike had kind of took. Or, you know, there was a bit of a business situation, but they've kind of got that figured out. But it's still leaving problems for us even now, and because, for instance, like there's live shows that are recorded from before '75, but we don't have access to them because it's part of the Mike Appel era, right?
Problems for us.
Hey, these are first world, man. This is you don't know what this does to me. We've got major gaps in the live download series. Pre '75, and actually the was it 2003 era. they recorded a bunch of live shows, but they're on some weird technology that doesn't work now or something.
Oh, yeah.
So like they're locked in and they kind of, I don't know. So yeah.
Make a fucking Reddit page or something.
Oh no, there is. Yeah, that's
Of course,
where do you think
yeah.
I'm getting all this
That's
stuff?
true. Yeah, of course. The Redditors know.
It's a sad existence, but it's very important.
Yeah.
So just in the background here, we're listening to the end of Jungle Land. He's so we're already coming to the end, but we've got it tagged on the playlist, and in the show we're gonna put Linda Let Me Be the One and So Young and in Love, a couple outtakes from this era. Songs that didn't make it onto the official album. That was always a big bone of contention between Van Zandt and Springsteen. Bruce Springsteen is like, for instance, The River is a double record, but Van Zandt always said, the songs that made the record weren't even the best ones that we recorded. We found that to be true actually later.
In a lot of cases, yeah. I'm a big fan of pop music and Bruce's pop side, and that's one of the things that I'd say, I'd love to get Steven Van Zandt. I hope he gets more involved in the Tracks 2 thing, because like he always said that there was better pop songs that Bruce wrote. He just refused to put them out because it's like, well, that's, Bruce makes records thematically, right? So this album, we've got Jungle and of course it ends the album, which is, arguably one of the first rock operas, I guess you could say.
Like in a song, like a rock opera in a song, like not an album.
Yeah. It's a whole orchestral, it's got movements to it, right? Essentially, right?
Yeah.
But it would just, Jungle Land, the cool thing I always think about with Jungle Land, so Cohen, this is pretty unusual, but that long sax solo in Jungle Land, Bruce taught Clarence to play that.
Oh, really?
Bruce sang that.
Oh, that's
cool. He
cool.
made Clarence learn every note the way he wanted it to sound. So he basically sang that whole sax solo.
That's
16 hours in the studio. 16 hours just to record that sax solo. And it's funny because I read the commentary that said that when they finished, and they said, okay, we're done, neither Bruce nor Clarence had realized it had taken them 16 hours. Like, it was just a few minutes, right?
Yeah.
But 16 hours.
And it is one of the best saxophone, and that's the thing, right, where even like George Jones, He Stopped Loving Her Today, one of the best country songs of all time. They had to piece that thing together from about 100 different takes, and so sometimes perfection is hard, or excellence, striving for that.
In George Jones' case, it was because he was shit.
Well, that's true. Yes. Completely. And then. Poor. Go ahead, sir.
No, I was going to say, I think 29 takes is what it took to do He Stopped Loving Her Today. But 24 of them he was drunk.
Yeah, really slurring and and then he kept singing the wrong melody and stuff too. But you could see where like Bruce has a vision and he executes, or has people to help him execute it, and Clarence in particular. Again, why we're talking about this album around this time of year. Coincidence, likely not, but June is an important time. But so June 18th, 2011. I'm going to get it wrong. 2011. Clarence died, and that was a big blow for the Easter Band. I mean, we had lost Danny Federici a few years prior. He was the organ player.
Okay.
Which I think was that in the fall. Crap. When I forget when Danny died, or was that March maybe?
Yeah, I was going to say it was in the spring.
The spring thing, yeah. But the Clarence one was a big one because there was such a visual aspect to it. Of course, right, you can see on the cover, and of course, just from a live perspective, Clarence, he even as he got older, I mean, he maybe lost a bit of his like pizzazz. He was a tall dude, but he got older and heavier as he got on. He used to be just a brick shithouse or whatever. But when he died, like those sax parts are very important, on most of the songs. And so his nephew Jake Clemens is the
I remember when we were driving out of I think we were leaving the Shoppers Drug Mart at the mall heading north, and we were listening to, I think it was the live version of Jungle Land actually,
probably,
and I don't know. It might have been on E Street Radio.
Probably. And Jake was probably doing his version.
And you said, and I think you even said that in some ways some of his is better.
Well, he had to work really hard.
Or just different.
Yeah, Jake's there's a whole, I don't know, like he definitely is not as good as his uncle, but he also has there's big shoes to fill there too. So it's I don't envy anyone having to step into that, because saxophone is very like all horns. There's a physicality to it. You need the lungs to blow. Because he blows. It's a tenor sax, but he's like blowing like just these hard like notes, and there's just nothing like Clarence Clemens. So
well, that's the sound, like Bruce said, was so the legend, of course, is that how Bruce met Clarence was that the band was playing in a bar on the Jersey Shore, and it was a stormy night, raining hard, wind blowing really, really hard, and there's nobody in the bar that they're playing at, and they're on stage playing, and all of a sudden the door opens, and not only does the door open, but it flies off the hinges, and it's Clarence standing there with his saxophone case going, "Mind if I sit in?"
yeah,
And nobody's going to deny a 6'6", 200 black man to sit in the band, right? So, but Bruce said from that moment on, it was the sound that was missing.
Yeah,
like it was what was missing from his band, and that's goes back to like Clarence's idol was King Curtis, and if you listen to any King Curtis, there are only kind of a few guys that play that way, and you mentioned that earlier, Karak.
Absolutely.
That big throaty sound. I mean, it was just unreal, right? Yeah. So once he heard Clarence play, it was like, yeah, this is the piece that's been missing from my band, right? So,
yeah. And on top of it, then he not only, he was able to still kind of use that, and it was like very intentional. Like, this is a big black man. Like, I don't think he was like looking for what's the term where they like tokenism or whatever, but like it just is, right?
Yeah.
And I think it speaks volumes. He definitely wasn't the first one to do that. I mean, the Allman Brothers Band was one of the first true interracial bands, but and others too. But it was just so important. Well,
I remember, it's interesting. I just, of course, the other day, the 18th, when it came up 2 days ago, of course, I had a Facebook post about Clarence passing, and what I wrote was actually, I couldn't see, when Danny passed away, that was a big thing, but they got through that. Yeah. But when Clarence died, I just thought he was such an integral part of the band and the sound, and that onstage foil for Bruce and everything else. I just thought, I can't see how they're going to go on. Yeah. I really thought it was probably the end of the E Street Band, and then, thankfully Bruce, I think he was on one of the late night shows. Jimmy Fallon's a big Springsteen fan, and he was on Fallon, and he said, the way we look at it is, if the fans are still there, we'll be still here. So, and he really stuck to that. And the only 2 times he's ever had to, Charles Giordano playing, covering the Hammond B3 parts that Danny used to cover, that was a little different because he came on board because of the
Seeger sessions.
Right?
He was in one of Bruce's offshoots from the tour prior. Yeah.
And he, has now finally, from Letter to You, really stepped into his game. Yeah. And then, but the same thing was the only when Max had to step out on a tour and couldn't fulfill all the dates on the tour, they got his son to play.
Yeah.
Oh right, yeah.
Right. Yeah. Which was like, what? Oh, okay. And then of course after Clarence passed, and then they brought Jake in.
That's cool.
So it's like they've actually kept it in the family even. Charles is a little bit outside of that, but
the next generation.
Well, Charles is at least part of that sort of New York, that tri-state connection at least, which helps, and kind of.
I think he played with. He had actually played gigs with Patty back long before he joined Bruce too.
Sure, when Patty did her solo stuff, in the 90s probably, yeah, that makes sense, yeah.
Does Bruce have kids?
3 kids. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. That's partly why your grandpa was actually able to meet.
I was actually going to ask it about that at one point. What? Yeah.
Well, so Bruce had been here. So his daughter Jessica is a world-class equestrian, and she's actually supposedly competing to be on the Olympic team.
Oh wow!
But she was here at Spruce Meadows in Calgary, competing, and Bruce was here, and so the press found out that he was here, so they kind of attacked him on the grounds, and there's actually pictures of him in the Calgary newspaper, and he's wearing like literally a yellow rain slicker, a baseball cap, and rubber boots, right? And the press was like, give us a statement, give us some photos, and he basically said, look, I'm here to support my daughter. I'm not here as Bruce Springsteen, the rock star. Leave me alone, kind of thing, right? So try and tie this all together. So Spruce Meadows is owned by the same people that own Atco, which I used to work at, right?
Okay.
And Atco and Spruce Meadows are owned by the Southern family. And so Nancy Southern runs Atco Gas, and her sister runs Spruce Meadows. So Nancy is a client of Pam's, my wife, and has been for 20 years, I guess, maybe more. And, you know, so she's one of the richest people in Calgary and super nice, such a wonderful woman. But anyway, so her mother, so the matriarch of the family, was on the grounds when Bruce was there the first time. And so Bruce had, you know, it was pouring rain and everything. So after Jessica had ridden, Bruce said to the guys so they have what's called the sponsors lounge. And you're only allowed to be in there if you're a sponsor. And the sponsors of Spruce Meadows are people like Rolex and Maserati.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Right? So high-end people.
Yeah.
So only people allowed in there if you're the sponsors, the competitors, so the horse jumpers themselves, and their trainers, and nobody else.
Yeah.
So press can't come in there. Nobody can come in there. So the first time when he was here, he was in there, and it cleared out because the horse jumping was done. And he asked the security guard at the front, he says, would it be okay if I laid down on one of these benches here and just had a little nap?
Oh, yeah.
And the guy says, yeah, sure, no problem. Nobody will bother you in here. And so he left him there. So Marge Southern, the matriarch of the family, she's in her probably late 80s now. So she would have been in her 70s, early 80s at the time. So she brings some of her old friends in to the lounge, and she sees this guy in a yellow rain slicker, baseball cap, and rubber boots laying on one of the sofas. And so she says, I don't know who you are, but you can't be in here. You gotta leave. You get out. You get out.
Who's this homeless guy?
And of course, Bruce does what Bruce would do. He says, okay, and he leaves.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
He doesn't say, hey, do you know, I'm Bruce
don't
Springsteen, blah, blah, blah. He just gets up and leaves. So anyway, fast forward. So the next year, when the Spruce Meadows thing was on again, and Jessica's coming to ride. So Nancy Southern, again, Pam's client, Pam said something to her about when he was here the first time and said, oh, you know, if you hear that he's coming back, you know, maybe you can give Brent an autograph. And Nancy said, oh, I think we can do better than that. I think Bruce and Brent need to meet.
No big deal.
Indeed,
Yeah.
they do.
Right. And so Pam says to Nancy, well, I'm not going to tell Brent that because he won't sleep till it happens.
Yeah.
But anyway, she told me, of course. And then the next year, when it's happening again, so Nancy comes by and she drops off these little pins, which are our ticket to get into that sponsors lounge. And she said, okay, you know, so all you had to do is basically look at the schedule of jumpers and figure out when Jessica's riding and then kind of work from there. So on the Thursday, I went out after lunch at work, and because she was riding about 1:30 or 2 in the afternoon. So I went out there and actually sat with Nancy in the stands, and we watched her. So Nancy's daughter is a show jumper with Jessica as well. So we watched Jessica to jump, and then Nancy said, well, just follow the horse, see where they go, and see if Bruce is around. And my little sponsor's pin there allowed me to go backstage, essentially back anywhere where I wanted on the grounds. So I followed her, and when they got the horse back to the barn, it was basically just Jessica and a trainer and I think maybe a bodyguard. And so that's fine. So then Friday, they were riding again at like 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And so I said, okay. So I stopped by the house and picked Pam up, and we drove out there. Spruce Meadows is only like 15 minutes from our house. And so we go out there and we go into the sponsors lounge, and we're sitting down and looking around. And Pam's like, no Bruce. And I go, no, but there's Patty. So his wife, Patty, was sitting there.
That's cool.
And so Pam goes, well, you should go talk to her. And I go, no, I don't want to talk to her. I want to talk to Bruce. And Pam's like, yeah, but, you know, if you go talk to her, maybe she'll tell you if he's here. Maybe she'll tell you he'll be here tomorrow at a certain time. And, you know, and I said, yeah. And more likely, she's likely to say, who's this freaking weirdo stalking my husband, and get me kicked out. So I refused to go talk to her, and I just left it. And Pam's like, oh, I think you're making a mistake. So the next day, she's riding about the same time. So we drive out there again, and we go into the sponsors lounge, and we sit down. Or no, we don't even sit down. We walk in, and there's Bruce standing at the bar. And he's getting some peanuts and some water.
Nice.
And
As one would.
Yeah, of course.
I froze. And Pam, like, wakes me up and says, okay, look, she's riding in 15 minutes. You've got this window right now
Yeah.
to have this thing happen. And so I went up to him and I said, I waited till he was finished at the bar, and he turned around and I said, hi, my name's Brent, and I've been your biggest fan since 1978. And he says, oh, that's a long time. And I said, would you mind signing something for me and maybe taking a picture? And he says, oh, sure, no problem. And then I could see sort of the wheels turning in his head, because he's kind of going, well, what would you have for me to sign?
Yeah,
carrying around
actually.
I'm the Spruce Meadows, a show jumping place. Nobody knows I'm here.
Yeah,
What
that's true.
would you, so I pull out my $80 Springsteen songbook hardcover.
Right. Yeah. Songs.
And,
That's right.
and a bunch of those, and a bunch of the postcards that I got, the Greetings from Asbury Park, New Jersey postcards that were basically the first album cover, right?
Yeah.
But I got a bunch of those when I was in Asbury Park in 1995.
Oh wow!
So I pulled those out and asked Bruce if he'd mind signing. So I got him to sign one of the postcards to my nephew Danny, and because he was a big fan as well. Yeah. And then he signed my book, and we took a couple pictures, and that was kind of it. But he actually was prolonging the conversation. Like I was kind of like, okay, thank you. I got what I needed. Trying to let him go. And he's like, oh, you've been to Asbury Park. So we started talking about Asbury Park. You should go back. It's way better now, and all this other stuff, right? So
yes, sir. Whatever you say, sir.
Yeah. Then I at least I kept my shit together. Got through it, and then I didn't lose it until we finished, and then we went kind of around the corner, and then Cam said, well, phone Nancy and let her know that it happened. So we phoned Nancy, and as soon as Nancy got on the phone, I started crying. Right? I was like, I can't believe that just happened.
Oh my god,
that's funny.
I'd probably pass out. Like I froze when I ran into Alan Frew from Glass Tiger. For God's sake, I mean, yeah, oh yeah, because I was a huge fan of his solo record. Like, but still, like, come on, I'd probably just pass out.
Well, and it is funny how that works, because the only time I've ever been really starstruck, I mean, I was starstruck in this case, of course, but the only time I ever made a fool of myself was I met Dr. David Suzuki.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
And that was not, that's not something like, I'm not a science guy. I could care less. But it was just the circumstances. I was in the, the Edmonton Journal building in Edmonton, right across the street from where I went to
Alberta College.
Alberta College.
Yeah.
And it was a cold, cold, snowy day, and I was standing inside the lobby to stay warm, waiting for my bus. And I opened the door to let somebody in. It was David Suzuki. And I said to him, do you know who you are?
Yeah. Yeah, I think he did. Yeah. Well, and I don't know if you know who Dave
I have
Suzuki
no
is.
idea.
Yeah, he has a really large, like, he's kind of got a gray afro kind of hair. He has a really unique look to him. So yeah, you'd know him. Like, if you know who he is and you saw him, like,
what are
nobody
his,
looks like him.
accomplishments?
Well, he had a TV show in the 80s and 90s. It was like The Nature of Things. It was a CBC production. Yeah.
Okay.
And he's always been like an advocate for environment. He's an environmentalist. And a scientist, and long before it was cool.
So he's not like a medical doctor.
No, he's like a scientist, like for nature.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah, yeah.
But I was reasonably assured meeting Bruce was not going to be. You always hear those stories about people talking about meeting your heroes, right? And it's, it often goes wrong.
Yeah.
It can't possibly live up to your expectations, right? But I was pretty sure that meeting Bruce wasn't going to be that way, and obviously it wasn't. I mean, he was just as nice as possible and everything else, right? But one of the coolest stories that makes me know that would have worked out fine was, you'll get a kick out of this one, Cone. So Bruce is playing a bar somewhere in the U.S., and after the show, he goes out and signs autographs. And at the end of the autograph line, the very last kid was a kid, a teenager. And so Bruce signs his record or whatever he had, and it's like 1 o'clock in the morning, and Bruce says, guy starts walking away, and Bruce is like, well, how are you getting home? And he says, I don't know. I was supposed to take the bus, but I don't think the buses are running anymore. And Bruce is like, well, I'll give you a lift.
Of course.
so he gets in the van, and Bruce drives the kid to his house. And of course he gets there, and then the kid says to Bruce, well, would you mind coming in and saying hi to my mom? She's a big fan, and frankly, she's not going to believe me, and I wasn't supposed to be out this late anyway, so I'm kind of in trouble.
Yeah.
So he says, yeah, okay. So they go in the house, and of course the kid goes up and tries to wake his mom up and says, Mom, Bruce Springsteen's downstairs. It's like, yeah, right, whatever. Right?
Yeah.
So she finally gets up and she comes downstairs, and there's Bruce sitting at her kitchen table. So she's like, oh, and nice to meet you, blah, blah, blah. Can I make you a sandwich? And he goes, yeah, I can eat. So, so she makes him a sandwich, and they chat for a while, and then he gets in the truck and goes home.
That's cool.
Yeah, isn't that amazing? It's funny. You read the Cyndi Lauper book, right? I think I lent that to you. The Cyndi Lauper's autobiography.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know what's funny is I was in the shitter and I started reading it. It was actually really good.
That's where I'm doing my reading, sadly, as always.
Yeah.
But she talks about meeting Bruce when he was married to his first wife, and she just hated him. And I'm like, I think that speaks more about her than about him personally, because I don't know. She's pretty cantankerous, and I know she had a hard go in her career and all that stuff, but they were like basically label mates, and they're both from that New York, tri-state scene. But yeah, she like thought he was an asshole, and this. And I'm like, oh, that's okay.
Well, maybe that has something to do with the time of Bruce's life, because as big Bruce fans, we all know that was a mistake marrying her anyway.
Yeah, absolutely.
They were married?
No, he was married to Julianne Phillips.
Julianne Phillips, actress.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's like, well, she's not a Jersey girl.
Yeah, exactly. She's not Patty. You just
That's not gonna
of course he married Patty.
Right. So and Bruce, I mean, if you look at the time frame, that was when he was, she was dressing him up in suit jackets and bolo ties.
Exactly.
Maybe it wasn't. Maybe he was just not being his true self for a little while there.
Absolutely, he probably was just not happy. Yeah, that's the one thing I wish his autobiography would have dug into a little more. But and he may never really get into some of that. But I feel like there are a lot of like missing pieces about a lot of personal details that we'll probably never know, and we probably shouldn't know. But a lot of other artists or actors would probably tell us. But that mid '80s period just is that's always been my period, because he went from the biggest star in the world to like basically throwing it all away, sort of, with one of the worst sounding albums of all time, with some of the best songs of all time. There's just a whole lot of dichotomy going on there. So.
So we haven't. I don't know how long have we been?
We're just over an hour now, so I think we're doing okay. Yeah,
that's not bad.
Yeah.
And we really haven't talked about the music on the record.
Yeah, we probably. Yeah, let's talk about the music on the record a little bit. Yes.
Well,
I go
Thunder
get some
Road.
water quick.
Not much more to say about Thunder Road. I mean, really, like I said, it is. And somebody asked that question within the last few weeks on social media. What do you think is the best first song of any record you've ever heard? And I gotta say, it's
of course it's Thunder Road.
Yeah, Thunder Road. Yeah,
of course it is. And
Which Cohen, you also know that I named my very first great rock band Thunder Road as well, right?
He's going upstairs to get water right now, so unfortunately, he's
that's all right.
Yeah, we'll have to forgive him. I can use this as an opportunity to just remind everyone, if for all of my 5 listeners and viewers, we're talking about Bruce Springsteen's classic third album, Born to Run. Basically, one of the best albums of all time. And
I think I read the Rolling Stone. It's in the top 8 of the top 100 best. It's number 8 on the top 100 of all time.
That makes sense. It is right up there with Sgt. Pepper and Pet Sounds, and and probably Nirvana, Nevermind, when they revise history. But which is a fine record. But yes, I'm getting like they did that revision to the top 500 albums or whatever, and they kind of like that was not that long ago, and they definitely did some tokenism in there, which it probably deservedly so. Like but they kind of pushed like Marvin Gaye, What's Going On, like into the, is it like not number 3 or 2 or now? Like, okay, well, let's not push it. I know it's an important record, but I don't know if I would call it that. I don't know. Importance, legacy, I guess, versus the actual recording itself. I don't know. But it's a great record, and not too many outtakes, at least officially. Of course, the gestation of this, I did finally check out that song, like the Wings for Wheels song. When it became Born to Run, but it was kind of its own song. It's been fun to hear some of those variations. He would, I guess, work out a lot of these songs live too, and fans got to know them, and they had lives of their own.
And when I listened to it this morning, I always. Different classic records like this something will stick out every time you listen to it, a different song or a different something will stick out. And for me, Backstreet's Today.
Yeah.
And I guess there's talk of that record. Is it a gay story, right? Like there's
that's
talk
true.
of
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
right? There's sort of that, because it is talking about two guys being super close friends, and maybe that's all it is, but there's that sort of subtext to it that talk about remember all the movies, Terry, we'd go to see, trying to walk like the heroes we thought we had to be.
Oh,
After all this time, I found I was just like all the rest, slow dancing in the dark and forced to confess.
Yeah.
Like, man, killer.
Yeah, that's a great line. Yeah, no, that's a good point. And I don't think he's ever really spoken about that, has he? Not that I know of.
I always picture it being about Terry McGovern.
Okay, yeah.
Right. So, which was Bruce's, I guess, bodyguard technically for many, many years.
Right. Yeah.
Who passed away.
Yeah. Was he gay though?
I think he might have been.
Yeah. Yeah. But that whole New York, that AIDS thing, and that was a big deal back then for sure.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, again, going back lyrically, some of my favorites: "Barefoot Girl Sitting on the Hood of a Dodge, Drinking Warm Beer in the Soft Summer Rain."
Yep.
I can barely speak those words.
Of course, yeah.
What?
Yeah.
and when you hit people with that, like just out of context, I'll be talking to somebody one day and say something, and they'll say that line, and it just it's like, wow.
Yeah.
It's completely evocative from the first word to the last. You don't need anything before it or after it.
Yep.
It's like, there you go.
Well, and
serve that up.
And I've told Colin before, and you probably picked up on this too. Like when I was starting to really dig into being an artist in my own right, like the idea of these lines. I mean, that's what we all aspire to in our own ways, and with Clayton Bellamy in particular, when we wrote This Road Is Mine, like the first line, like it was our 14th summer back in '93. Like we really wanted to just like set the stage, like Springsteen would, right?
Yeah.
Like and Clay really brought that. Like I kind of forgot about that approach, and he's like, we got to make the first few lines just like tell the story. I'm like, okay, yeah, I got you now. Yeah. So yeah. That's like the high watermark. These sorts of things.
I really like I mean, it's not on this album, but I really like the Promised Land.
Yeah. Well, Darkness is a whole other beast. Yeah.
The lyrics on that one.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. That one would probably speak to you maybe more even like lyrically.
Yeah.
There's because it was like in that whole concept of like a darkness on the edge of town. Like if you've ever like been in a small town and you're like outside and there's like like you get it, like
okay. It's like like up at Flying J. It's like just because it's very
it is on the edge of town
and it's on literally on the edge of town, and the rain often comes in I think because it's by water
for sure.
So it's often very dark and rainy on the edge of town.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
And that technically is my favorite Springsteen record too. So and that I think it's hard to put something above Born to Run, really. But I think for Darkness, again, because it came out the week that I heard Bruce Springsteen for the first time, right? So it was the new record. And but it was also the time, right? It was 1978. There's a lot of the, Bruce is one of the few huge rock stars that the punks still liked.
Yeah.
Right?
True,
because,
he wasn't too corporate, right? Yeah, he was.
Right. He had that kind of, he's still, you're not going to change me turn me into anybody that I'm not, right? So he was respected by that group, and wrote some songs for those guys. I mean, Elvis Costello is a huge Springsteen fan. The Because the Night Patti Smith thing, that's a pretty, writing. What's the big song he wrote for the Ramones, but kept?
Oh my God!
From the River.
I was. I was gonna say Don't Look Back, but it wasn't. No, it was.
No, that was for
right.
The other guys. Hungry Heart.
Yeah.
Hungry Heart was written essentially. John Landau said you should write this song for them, and then when he finished it, John Landau says, "Well, you're not giving that away.
Well,
keep that one."
Like Green Day, they're huge fans of Springsteen. And
right.
It actually pokes in their music, their like American Idiot era.
For sure.
There's a lot of very Springsteen-esque
bands around that time had sort of rediscovered or were finally coming out, like Gaslight Anthem, where they're actually from New Jersey too, and they have that same amp behind you, by the way. The guy he has an SRC 65. Oh yeah. But and the Killers, of course, like they made.
Oh
they
yeah.
Did not.
Well, Sam's Town. Even the name Sam's Town.
Yeah, and he even sings with that sort of it's kind of annoying, that vibrato-y like Springsteen does, Roy Orbison does but yeah, like the influence, and it's funny because this is where like a lot of people were influenced by like Tunnel of Love and Human Touch era Springsteen, which is like clearly not his best, and it's still better than most other artists. Other stuff, so yeah, no, it's song for song, yeah, it's really hard to beat this. But yeah, Darkness though, yeah, you're right. Like 10 songs, like from top to bottom, it's really hard to think. You can't even really pick it apart either. Like every song stands on its own, but it's an album.
Is he religious?
Well, he was raised Catholic.
Okay, because just when I think like Adam raised a Cain.
Yeah, a lot of biblical references. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, he talks about that more actually in later years. He does talk. I don't know if he would consider himself Christian or not, but he was raised Catholic, so a lot of that imagery and
well, like he hated the church. He hated the Catholic Church,
of course.
And
yeah.
when he was a kid, and then
as all teens do.
I think what happens. It seems to be particularly with Catholics is you can never get away.
You're always guilty, and you're.
That's what that's what my Catholic friends always tell me is you can't get out of this organization, right? And I think what happens is for Bruce, there's a lot of times later that lyrically he started bringing stuff up that was religious iconic stuff, right? And like the 7 crosses of Mary or Mary's, whatever that was from couple years ago, but so he had 7 stations of the cross, right? So he goes back to that Catholic imagery, and I think he's embraced it. He seems to have embraced it more. Like he talked about that at the Springsteen on Broadway, but again, not so much in a fatalistic way. I mean, the Catholic guilt thing. It's more about these are and as an atheist and agonistic myself, I've always said that there's nothing like the 10 Commandments. That's a pretty good way to live. Regardless of who came up with it or where it comes from, living your life according to, or quoting Graham Parsons would be, I love the Christian life, right? It's there's nothing wrong with living your life according to a set of, set down rules to a certain extent. But from my perspective, I don't see how that ties into God or death or afterlife or any of that. For me, it's just you should live your life that way. Right?
That's right.
Well, he strikes me as an agnostic.
Yeah, probably. I think it's hard to say. Yeah, and maybe we'll never know. That's kind of the beauty of it too. Like I presume they didn't raise the kids in church. I actually don't know.
I don't think so. No, I don't think Patty's got much of a background in it either. So yeah.
No, she'd be Irish Catholic probably too, though, right? Or
yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah, but no, I think that's like all those good tropes. I mean, it shaped who he is, and he's not alone in that. And I think a lot of his songs are informed by that, especially when he started really getting known for his acoustic shows, like in 1990, the Christic shows. It was like a fundraiser thing, and it got heavily bootlegged. Now it's available, but he started doing that sort of storyteller thing. So 1990, and then around the Ghost of Tom Joad era, his shows 96, 97, it was just him and a guitar. Or piano or whatever, and then again in 05. The 05 shows are probably some of my favorite Bruce shows, like of any era, of any, because he tells the stories a bit. He did the VH1 Storytellers around that era too, and that's what, of course, now the Springsteen on Broadway thing really brought that all together, and he kind of tells his story, but it's also everyone else's story. It's it's just brilliant. Like whatever. I can't.
The one that got me, the story that got me on Broadway was talking about the tree that grew in his yard, right? Because he said, once he went back and the tree was gone. But because it was a tree that he'd grown up with since he was a young child, the tree's gone, but he still feels its presence. Like it's you could almost sit under the tree still.
For sure.
Right? And feel the how it shades you from the heat, and like it's like, whoa. And I have that same experience. I have the tree in the yard that I grew up in.
Yeah.
I was never much of a tree climber, but I certainly sat and pondered life underneath that tree quite a bit.
Absolutely.
So it's interesting.
No, absolutely. Yeah, he draws a lot.
I had one question I wanted to ask KARAC of. I don't know if we're getting close to closing this up or not, but I just something that crossed my mind. Do you have a favorite? What's your favorite Springsteen song that relates to me in the sense of being your dad, your father. And I'll give you time to think about it. I'll tell you mine. And I think it happens to be like there's like when he did the Wish in Springsteen on Broadway, that really, that's the one for his mom.
Yeah.
Like there's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
But for me, it's probably Independence Day, but it's not.
Yeah.
It's not entirely. It's not my story. Like it's not my father's story. It is in a way. My dad is a non-communicative kind of stoic, never said more than 20 words to me in my life kind of thing, right? So there's a little bit of that. Let's say goodbye. It's Independence Day. All boys must run away, right? So,
Well, yeah, and he used to kind of like actually, I was just listening to a live show from like one of the Winterland shows from '78, and he introduced it as this one's going out to my dad, and his dad was in the crowd actually that night. So yeah, I think he really related to that one himself too. But just knowing what we know about Bruce and his relationship with his dad too, it's like for me, like that sort of hit archetype would be more like Dennis, right? Like my stepdad.
Right.
So a lot of those songs can kind of relate to that, even though I never really rebelled as much as Bruce did. Like our relationship, of course, I went really deep on the one there with When You Need Me, right? Because I thought that was like really like, I don't think he meant it that way. I think it might have been more of a love song, but
yeah, no, that's true.
Yeah, for sure.
That makes sense that would be your answer because I get that. Yeah,
I think more our relationship like really realistically is probably more like brothers or uncle like kind of thing, like the blood brothers or brothers under the bridge. Like I do feel like you and I can almost like more partners, like in a way, like just due to our origins, right, or the true story. But and that's going to change too. I mean, over the next decades, but. I think some of those traditional, father son things that he wrote about were, it's harder to apply them for me and you, like personally, but I could definitely see how. That's
interesting. And you said that because too, I actually thought about, in reference to this question, I was thinking about how, again, a lot more of what Springsteen's gone through with his father would be a little closer to what you went through with Dennis than me, right?
For sure. And sad but true, yeah, especially knowing more about Bruce's dad, like, and then like, that like some of that really relates to maybe a little too much, but definitely. And I was always drawn a little more to which is probably why I like Mark Cohen so much, is because like he was like the youngest of older parents, and I always found that his perspectives were more he was observing his parents, and I always felt like, and Bruce did a little bit of that too, more I guess with his mom on with the Wish and stuff, but I was always a little more drawn to songs like, not like this is a song about me and the way I feel about you. It's more like I'm observing you and this is what I see about you, and I've always been a little more drawn to those kinds of songs. So I'm not, but Bruce's songwriting has changed often too. It's been
for sure,
which has been great to see. I love this later Bruce too. Like it's he's exactly how rock and roll should age. It's
Letter to You. That was I didn't listen to the full album, but the song I listened to, it was really good.
Sorry, I missed that, Colin.
Oh, I just said I didn't listen to the full Letter to You album, but I listened to the song when it came out, and it was really good. I don't know. I don't have enough in my bank to know how much it's changed, but
that's because he's referring now to like loss, like he's seeing people his age die now, right? And that's got to be heavy, like, and it will be, when we get there. But it's been great to watch, and he's kind of looking back and kind of reframing his past. I think that whole Springsteen on Broadway era was really important for that too. Good Lord, we could go for days on this. Let's try and bring it back to Border Run here just a little. We were talking about certain lines. I mean, you're right. Like, some of the single lines of these songs are just like, they're just so beautiful. And then Jungle Land as a piece overall tells the story. And these, if I recall, I frequent Bruce Bass, the website, quite often, and they if I recall, I think basically this album is like the most performed, or no, maybe it's Darkness, but some of the songs of this like are the most performed of all. Like they have a tally of how many times he's performed, like Backstreets or whatever. Oh yeah, for sure. in particular, every time I hear night, I think of Bat Out of Hell. So, in particular, that one, I don't know if maybe it's in a similar key or whatever, but I feel like that was maybe the reference if Rundgren was stealing any any tricks, just sonically, I think maybe more than anything, but the way it breaks down and then the horns are so like up front and the 16ths on the hats. I mean, yeah, come on, that's. It's probably the worst song on the record.
No, yeah.
I mean, if I had to pick one,
if you got to pick one, right?
Yeah. Which is terrible because oh my god, okay.
But I think let's sum up the record with the last verse of Jungle Land.
Yeah.
Outside the streets on fire and a real death waltz between what's flesh and what's fantasy. And the poets down here don't write nothing at all. They just stand back and let it all be.
Ugh.
And in the quick of the night, they reach for the moment and try to make an honest stand.
Yeah.
But they wind up wounded. They're not even dead. Tonight in Jungle Land.
Ugh.
Like that kills me.
I know. I'm crying right now. Yeah, it's sad, but because and then of course the woes like the
original.
Actually, I did read as I was doing preparations for this. I read some of the stuff on, and so they had finished Jungle Land. They had finished the whole song. They had it all done, and they're kind of listening to the last playback. And I don't remember who said it, whether it was John Landau or Steve, but somebody said it's missing something. Just the ending is missing something. And Bruce just said, I think I know what it is. And he said, turn on the mic.
Yeah.
And he went back in the studio and he just sang those woes at the very end. Just that was it. And he just one take.
Yeah.
And they all kind of looked at each other and said, yeah, that was it.
even the chords, like at the end, like it kind of moves a little differently and it builds tension. Just like, it's, oy vey. Yeah. Yeah. That's, this is how you do it right here. Yeah, Bruce. So we're gonna do this again. We're gonna talk about Born in the USA again. Because I'm of course there's 52 weeks in a year. There's 26 letters in the alphabet. So I'm trying to hit every letter twice. But I've had to break a few rules to do that. But I'm gonna use the letter E for E Street, I think, next. And this one might be a B or it might be an S. I'm not sure. It should be a B. Did you know that your grandpa sorts things phonetically instead of alphabetically?
Yes. I remember when you told me that. And I was too young to even care. I was like, maybe we were outside Sobeys, driving we were living in the old house, so probably like 12 years old, and you told me that.
Well, it looks way better. I'll give it that.
Yeah, well, yeah.
And it makes a lot of sense in a lot of ways. I'll give him that.
Yeah.
But that's not the Dewey Decimal System.
Yeah. Now that I have 1,800 albums, I can't redo it, right?
That's right.
That's true.
Okay, I'll tell you now. I'm going to fess up. So I envision a day when you have passed. I will take the time. Just so you know.
That would be fun.
Yeah, all right.
Well, because I'm gonna have to look through them all and probably play them all in order anyway. So
right.
Maybe I'll leave them. Maybe I'll resort mine in
memory, in memoriam.
That's right. Yeah. It's
that would be
it's hard. You got to know where to look.
Well, and that's the thing. I would I have this sort of vision that when I, if I retire with a life of leisure ahead of me, I can't imagine it happening. But if it ever does happen, I want to listen to my entire record collection from A to Z.
Yeah, yeah.
Every record.
That sounds like
cool.
a good task. I'd like to do that too. And I think maybe we can just do that together. Because if I play my cards right, I can retire early, and you can.
True.
And
right.
But then, like Willie Nelson says, retire to what?
Yeah. You got that.
Just gonna go play some music and listen to music, scan some photos. I think that's gonna be my next task. I got to get I got to digitize properly some of the videos and the photos a bit. But that's it. Speaking of, I do have a roll of film. Developed. I don't know if I did show that, like from the Springsteen show that we saw in 03 or 04. Yeah, whenever he was here on that Rising tour. Yeah, got a few shots from stage right there when we were sitting up in the. Were you on the floor, or were you up in the stands too for Bruce in Calgary?
No, I've never. The closest I've ever been was the last tour when we saw him on the with the 18-piece band.
Right.
And we were on Clarence's side, stage left, stage right.
Stage right. Yeah.
Get that right.
Yeah.
where Susie was. So, and we were like maybe 30 or 40 feet away from Susie.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, really
Nice.
close.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah.
And that was Pam was wearing her stone pony jacket.
Nice.
Oh,
And they were talking about Asbury Park, and of course Pam held up her jacket, and Susie was looking over at our side. She points at it and goes, "Holy cow!"
Yeah. I thought, we're in Canada. You can't have one of those.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I'll never forget because when I first saw him on in '93 or whatever on the Human Touch Lucky Town tour with the other band, we could talk for a long time about them, but I was behind the stage, like because it was sold out, right? So Uncle Rob and I guess Auntie Stewart, I think they might have been on the floor, but we were behind, and but I'll never like Bruce is like he's running around the stage and he's like pumping his fist, and I swear he looked right at me.
yeah.
Like he probably didn't, but I still feel like he did.
Yeah.
And that's the the mark of a great entertainer, right? They'll play to every person in that room, and that's what we all aspire to. Yeah. All right. Well, on that note, I think we better shut down. An hour and a half, but hey, that's okay. It's Father's Day. It's yeah. And
that's what it deserves.
Yeah, totally, if not more. So I think Conan and I are going to go watch. We'll go put on the concert. I've got the 5.1 surround hooked up, and we'll watch a little bit of Hammersmith Odeon, and
nice.
Yeah, for sure. What are you going to do for the rest of the day?
Not too much. Probably just get out in the sunshine with the dogs, hopefully.
Right on. Yeah, see, that's what we need. We need like big giant TVs with big speakers outside. Well, it's like a drive-in theater, a walk-up theater. Maybe. But yeah, because I think I'd spend far more time outside if I had a nice TV and stereo out there.
Yep.
So right. Well, thanks for everyone for suffering through this edition of This Road Is Mine. KARAC Hendricks, Cohen Hendricks, Brent Bexon. All right, peace out.
Bruce.